stop mass marketing without being human. It's ironic, today we can reach so many people so easily with so many messages, and yet less and less is landing.
It's really thinking about it more authentically and not focused on getting 659 leads, but maybe 65 leads.
Welcome to the Midgame Mindset. Join us as we dive into the pivotal moments that shape today's top sales and marketing leaders, RevOps innovators, and entrepreneurs. This is where grit meets growth and the game changes for good. If you find value in this conversation, be sure to share it with another growth leader who would enjoy it. And now, let's get to the show. Welcome to the Midgame Mindset. I'm your host, Rich Bishop, and I love it when people with different backgrounds come together to create something unique and new. And that's exactly what we're going to talk about today. Today's guests are Tanya and Tony Thorson. Now, Tanya is a growth strategist, a product leader, and she's got an extensive background in the B2C space, working with brands that we all know, like LL Bean, New Balance, Jockey, Land's End, and her husband, Tony, is the managing director of Litech US, which is a precision gauge manufacturer. And you may think, how do those two things come together to create something unique? Well, they've written the book, Get Off Your Mass, which is a new take and a new lens on marketing that actually explains a lot of what we're seeing in the marketplace. So I'm really looking forward to this conversation. Tanya, Tony, thank you guys so much for joining.
Thanks for having us, Rich.
Nice to be here.
It's great to have you guys. Now, I hit a couple of the highlights. I'd love to hear a little bit more about you, and then we'll dive more after that into how the book came about and some of the concepts there.
Sure. I'll start first. So, as you mentioned, Rich, I've been in retail apparel, B2C and B2B, 2C in retail apparel for about 20 years. I started my career as a merchant. And as a merchant, you're responsible for driving new business. If it's new line extensions, if it's new, new product updates, what have you. And that is also responsible for the P&L. And so as a merchant, you have this mindset about how am I going to take care of the customer? How am I going to drive the revenue, right? And so as I moved into marketing, that methodology carried with me. And I'm not certain that marketing has been given that credibility of thinking about it that way from consumer to P&L. It's more consumer or buyer, I should say, to funnel. And so as I moved into marketing, I was different. I was kind of a unicorn and thinking differently and thinking about other KPIs and metrics that the traditional marketing teams don't think of, like pipeline velocity, net new retention. So as I moved into marketing, I decided to take this huge pivot into SaaS, a B2B startup SaaS company based in Chicago, cybersecurity company. So a lot of new levers for me, a lot of new, things of how I could really kind of stretch myself. And I was like, let's do it, because SaaS it's, everybody's talking about it. It's only going to get bigger and more robust, and I want to learn about it. And so I took this pivot into a SaaS startup, and that took me to a B2B SaaS world. And it was different. And we'll talk more about it. But bottom line is I've been in both lanes now, B2B, B2C, and retail apparel, B2B SaaS. And I see a lot of synergies, a lot of things that are bleeding over into each other's lanes. And we'll talk more about that. But that's my background. And excited to be here. Thanks for having us.
Hey, Rich. I'm Tony, and I am definitely from the business to business world. And I am the managing director of Litech US. That's a fancy word for jack of all trades. So a lot of it is marketing as well. And we're a distributorship for precision measuring tools in the US, Canada, and Mexico for a Danish manufacturer based in Gilleleje on the North Sea in Denmark. And it's a small company, wonderful people, and I've worked with them for decades now.
Excellent. Yeah. Thank you guys so much for joining. I would love to hear, obviously, very different backgrounds, but the B2B is kind of connecting things together. I'd love to hear how the concept of B2A came about and how you guys started to form that into what's now the book.
Yeah. As I said, and playing into both lanes, if you will, I started seeing some things that I felt we needed to take some of the principles from B2C into a B2B atmosphere. And when we started doing that, buyer-led, omni-channel, thinking about the funnel not as stages, but as signals, thinking about what's in it for the buyer, creating content that was much more tailored for solutions instead of it being product-led, I thought to myself, I said, you're still touching a human there, just like you're touching a human in B2C. So at the end of the rope, there's this commonality, and that's the human. And as we started talking about this and AI hitting us every which way possible today,
Yep.
how do we still keep that? How do we keep that tradition? How do we keep that emotional intelligence? Because if there's any time now that we need it more, as we're getting so caught up with artificial intelligence, it's really being that taking that humanistic approach. And that's where we started chatting. I mean, we chat all the time. And now that we're empty nesters, we chat a lot more because there's nobody else to talk to in the house other than each other. So I'll let you kind of take it from there, Tony.
Well, yeah, like you said, the conversations, me coming from the B2B world and Tanya more B2C, she's got a wonderful newsletter that she's writing on LinkedIn. And I started helping, talking, and we were talking about that and writing different things. And eventually we started saying, really what I'm doing in the business to business is the same thing. We're all making connections with other people.
Mm-hmm.
And that's how, we thought it was kind of a fun acronym, to come up with B to A, business to anyone, because really that's what both sides are doing. So we thought it would be a nice way to put everything together.
That's great. B2A, business to anyone, which is interesting because I think in the past, there really was a distinction with how a consumer made a purchase versus how somebody in procurement on the business side made a purchase, right? But those things have really been blending over the last 25 or so years, thanks to Amazon and others for really kind of blurring those lines.
Well, yeah, I think Amazon, that's a great example. Just this weekend, you talk about the last 25 years, just this weekend, I'm watching the Packers, the football game, and you see Amazon doing AWS, and they're talking about how they can help the NFL bring video to you, which is B2B to C, which is kind of B to A. And I saw another one was Salesforce with their agent force. They have Matthew McConaughey and Woody Harrelson having these, what would normally look like a traditional B2C consumer advertisement, and it's really businesses talking to businesses in ways that they can figure out together to collaborate to help the consumer. So that's kind of B to A, I think,
B to A. I think that's an interesting concept. And it's one that as a RevOps professional, I've been working with companies on not only their marketing, the marketing functionalities and the campaigns that they have, but then of course, yes, very much about funnel management on the sales side. And you have seen some interesting dynamics over the last few years of people really doing more and more research before they even pick up the phone or before they'll even accept a phone call. And it's really changing the way that businesses are even going to other businesses.
Absolutely. I mean, the Gartner statistic is, I think an individual might touch your brand 10 to 12 times before they really want to engage with someone from that company. And that freedom and that independence is basically hitting us in the face like, hey, this is a buyer-led world today. It shouldn't be product-led. And because the resources that they have, because the technology where we're at, and because the freedom that they have, in one of our comments in the book is a person doesn't transform at 8:59 a.m. and then again at 5:01 p.m. They're the same human all day long. And that's where I think that's an unlock for me and recognizing that. And that's true. We might be thinking about our budget, and then we might be, okay, what's for dinner? What am I making for dinner tonight? Who's going to pick up the kids from soccer? And then, okay, we have all that done. Now I can go online, and instead of requesting a demo and spending 45 minutes of my time, because time is currency, I can now watch it after I put the kids to bed and it's a recording of a live demo, so I can stop and start it. And if I have any questions, then I'll, engage. But again, it's giving them the tools and the resources to do that independently. And so when they do get to you, they should be obviously further through the funnel because of that. And if you're not, well, then shame on you.
Yeah, I think that's so good that, like Rich, you said it's so difficult to measure today too. And that we're touching so many people at so many different points. And it's really hard to know for sure until right till the end if they're really, interested. That's why some of the things in our book, I think, are so important. We talk about like being human and curious and things like that, because when you're building that ecosystem, I think, or we think, it's from the beginning to the end, and all that beginning stuff and all that preparation, all those things that you're doing, it'll pay off in the end, we hope, but it's hard to measure up until that point in that funnel, right?
Yeah.
And the mindset is really what needs to change from an internal perspective. We need to, and one of the chapters, Rich, is the cross-functional champion, breaking those silos down, looking at the business holistically. What is our end game? And that's where the P&L, that's where the revenue comes into play. What's our target? And how do we work that backwards? So then everyone feels that autonomy, accountability, and they're not segmented into their little department. Yes, they have responsibilities within their department, but they're looking at it through the lens of a P&L instead of through top, middle, bottom of the funnel, passing the baton off to sales and going, okay, let me know how that lead gets, if it gets to the finish line. No, we should be with them getting it to the finish line and helping them get it to the finish line. And that's where I think marketing today has this, people perceive us as this funnel. And the funnel today is, it's a definition of however you want it to make it look. So your leads look good. And and right? It's like
as a RevOps professional, you are speaking my language, right? The worst thing in the world is a marketing organization that just throws leads over the fence and they go, good luck, because you know what's happening on the other side. Sales is going, yeah, that's junk. I'm going to go do my own lead gen. And now you got two sides. It's just a mess.
Don't you think, Rich? That's what I've been saying with Tanya too. Sorry to interrupt, but I think it, like you said, 25 years ago, it felt like there was a split between sales and marketing. And now I think it's kind of coming back together.
Oh, it is. It
has sales people need to know marketing, the marketing need to know sales, but there was a split there for a while.
Yeah. And Tanya, to your point, my background before I got into this was in finance. So I've been the one that's been preaching exactly what you just said. So thank you for preaching it for me, because it does connect to the P&L at the end.
Exactly is, finance, when marketing's talking, they want to know how it, finance, for example, they want to know how it impacts cash flow. If we just say we have 659 leads, so what?
Right.
So what? If I have 6 leads and those leads get to the finish line and our average order value went up and our pipeline we cut it by 50%, those are things, product's going to want to know how that's happening. It's not speaking always in the traditional KPIs, because I think those are bogus too in many ways. So
I think it's marketing speaking with everyone, kind of bringing everyone together. We like to think that, she talks about cross-functional champions. I think the messaging kind of starts with marketing, and that can be internal marketing as well as external. As long as when people get on the same page, that's kind of a little bit of a different topic, a little more organizational behavior. But I think marketing really has a key role internally as well.
Well, it's to me, it's marketing is fueling revenue, not just making noise. And we need to speak to it in that language.
I think you also hit on an important point here as well, is when there are silos in an organization through that customer journey, there's an internal focus and an internal priority, because we are focused on how we operate and less focused on how the customer goes through their journey. Because if you take the customer's viewpoint and the customer journey first, that's going to be priority, and those seams are going to go away.
Absolutely. You hit it right on the head. It's more about a sales quota. It's more about leads. number of leads. We're not thinking about it from the buyer's perspective. And that's what the book is talking about, is putting it from a buyer's perspective. The buyer should be in every conversation. When I was in retail back in the late 90s, early 2000s, even though we didn't have AI and all this robust technology, it was always thinking about the buyer. If something's working, how are we going to amplify it? If something's not working, how are we, inventory, merchant, design, finance, all of those people, how are we going to get out of it? Is it through marking it down? Is it through cutting some loss, cutting some later receipts? It was that mentality, and it was always about the buyer and the P&L. Mm-hmm. And today, we're finally coming to terms in B2B that we have to start looking outward instead of inward. But that inwardness needs to really happen by breaking those silos down, so we can start getting to the numbers that we need to hit. And we look like we're not just creating noise, but we're actually creating a systematic strategy.
Now,
easier said than done.
Yeah, of course. Of course. I would love to dig in just a little bit more and tease this one out of there were concepts in B2C and there were concepts in B2B that were separate. What are some of the concepts that you're now starting to see blend over that maybe would have been traditionally seen as a B2C kind of thought pattern or philosophy that now is entering into that B2B world?
Well, the first one would be buyer-led versus product-led. It's always been about the buyer in B2C, and walking into SaaS, B2B, it's not that case. It was product-led. We were telling them about us instead of us helping them. The second one would be, it's nonlinear. So we can't just shoot off a bunch of emails that personalize them by putting, "Hi, Rich," and then everything below it is generic. We need to be where they're going to be. There's 4 unique generations in the marketplace today. So we have to understand our personas, what the product is. Maybe it is TikTok that you need to be on. Maybe it is email. Maybe it is this. So making sure that you're everywhere, because the example I used where we don't transform from 8:59 and then back it on again at 5:01, we're in personal, we're in work. And so that freedom, you need to have that omni. And then the third is just the messaging, really personalizing the messaging at a level where it is about solutions and results, and taking pressure off of those personas you're going after, making their job easier, making them feel seen and heard, and like, this brand gets me, I trust this brand now. Those would be the 3 things that I would say have been the big unlocks. And that helped us in my SaaS startup, is bringing those to action and making those work. And we were able to tighten the sales cycle up by 50%.
That's really good. 2 of the things that come to mind for me would be B2C brings emotion, and B2B, that's pretty generalized. But I think if you bring those 2 basic ideas together, that's where we like to think of B2A. You talk about, for example, we talk about Palo Alto Networks. They had the cybersecurity campaign with Keanu Reeves, which I thought was really interesting. That's a B2C style campaign, having fun with, your customers are probably Matrix watchers, maybe, and you've got somebody like Taylor Swift, who's everybody thinks is making the connections all B2C, but boy, she had the operations going behind with the different deals with AMC and things like that. So she brought a B2B mentality to, her very personal, relatable lyric. So that's emotion, lot kind of coming together.
Yeah, that's a good one. Yeah, it's not just a transaction anymore. You need to build the relationship. And I think traditional sales thought that they built the relationship, but it has to be seen through the teams, and that relationship starts with the outreach that marketing's doing, and that marketing outreach needs to be it needs to come through an agreement with both customer success and the sales team, so we're all on the same page, speaking the same language.
Yeah, it's a attribution models are very interesting now to work with, right? Because it's not linear anymore, and because you have all of these pieces. But I love that you touched on it. It also has to follow through the traditional sales funnel into the client success side of things too. So marketing scope really, and the importance there, I think, has increased a lot, that you are following that customer from awareness all the way through and continuing to stay with them through that customer journey, right?
We need to also be thinking about two metrics: CAC, customer acquisition cost, and lifetime value, LTV. Those are really important. And what I see a lot of is CAC, like just get new customers, new customers, new customers. And we forget about all of these existing customers. Well, in retail, we used to say those customers over there are your ambassadors. They're the ones that keep the lights on in the building. They're the ones that are talking to you and telling you issues, focus groups we would have. And they were a voice of the brand in a good way and a constructive way. And so to me, it's always finding that balance between the two. And I don't think we look at it that way in B2B SaaS. We look at it more logos, more logos, more logos.
That's wonderful. That's an interesting thing. We never talked about that, about how they're brand ambassadors. That I liken that to, say, a case study. Or if we are dealing with General Dynamics and they love our gauges, it's like, hey, look at us. We help them build a tank. So there's our Litech ambassador. So there's a similarity there. So just made me think of that.
No, that's a good point, and one that's interesting to follow through. And we see that the ambassador piece becomes more and more visible now, I think, because of social media. You've got Instagram, you've got TikTok, you've got all of these pieces, which has become, for many companies, a central focus of their marketing strategy, where the definition of an ambassador before probably looked different in how it showed itself, right?
Absolutely. Absolutely. And to me, it's critical in growing your business and scaling your business. Not necessarily when you're bringing in new logos, the quality of those new logos might not stick with you. And these people have stuck with you. And so I think more emphasis and more curiosity and more engagement with our customers that are with us needs to be happening. And that's where the engagement and the emotional intelligence comes into play and helps us drive our business going forward. So we do get that scalability.
Yeah, the influence and the and things like that. You talk about TikTok. I mean, that's everywhere. If you watch CNBC or Fox Business, that's all they're talking about. You can't imagine how much money must be making. I hear the investor guys say, whoever gets the piece of that U.S. part of TikTok, invest. Now, don't invest based on what I said, but that's what I heard. So my point is, they must be making a lot of money through influence, collaborations, and ambassadorships, and it's just changed so much. I think we all know that because we're on social media, but it's just, those collaborations are really interesting. They're fun to watch and see how they happen. Like with Sydney Sweeney. I mean, that was a great one. That worked.
Yeah, in a really good way for American Eagle.
Absolutely. Now, you guys had said something a little bit earlier that I want to come back to. I recently had Stephen Uman on the show, and we talked a lot about the personal aspect of the purchase. And I'd love to get your take, because you did say at the end of the day, it's a human that's making the decision. Yet on the other side, there has been a really big push in the B2B space to automate as much as possible, to leverage AI, to go out to tools like Clay and others and just suck up as much information about this person as we can, spit it into ChatGPT to create the perfect message that we can send to them, and that'll take care of it for us. Those are two very different thought patterns. I'd love to get your thoughts.
Yeah, I think the automation piece is we can use it now because of AI can help us get the results, the data that we need. But once the data is there, to uncover and look at what that data means is still a human. So the days of having to go into a room for 3 days with all this data and like all this paper and, okay, we're going to come out in 3 days and let you know what our findings are. AI can do that for us. They can do the stuff that more the operational piece, the stuff under the hood. What's really important though is, and what's not happening, to your point, Rich, is we are so fixated on following every step of where the buyer is today. And so we've got this technology and this software. And the next thing you know, your operations people are like, I've got 30, pieces of technology here. Now I all have to centralize this. And that is being helped through AI. But what it's doing is you're just getting through the fundamentals of it. Or not the fundamentals, but the numbers. You're not actually really reading the numbers and what they mean. And it's just a pass off then to the C-suite. Like, here's that dashboard you wanted. And nobody's really making the time to really look at the data and say, what does this mean? What does this outlook mean? And that is where the agility needs to come into place. Like, you probably have a business model of where you're going. That's the foundation, but maybe your buyers are saying, they're not responding to your content. So maybe it needs to be more of, the content needs to alter, and we're not having those types of conversations because we're trying to watch every step that the buyer is taking. And I think that has become the issue. It's very transactional. And I think it's also a generational thing too, is once someone pulls those numbers, they're going to get back on TikTok when they're done.
I think you are hitting at the core of idea of our book, which is get off your mask, which basically means stop mass marketing without being human. It's ironic. Today we can reach so many people so easily with so many messages, and yet less and less is landing. So one of the things that on the cover of our book, we have a little smudge, and that's a representation of Andy Warhol, who took automation to a new level. He was silk screening, Campbell soup cans and things like that. But then again, each little one, because they were silk screened in ink, they would have a little smudge, and that was a good thing. And I thought that was a nice analogy for, you, like we said, we can automate, we can touch so many different people, but if you really don't get to the core and are relatable and authentic in your messaging, it's not going to land, right?
Yeah, the personalization in its true sense is not happening. Darren McKee, Stephen Uman, they talk a lot about doing a lot more upfront of your homework, knowing about the customer, knowing about the business, knowing maybe something, the earnings report, or if they were in the news, or, just something that makes a little bit more of a connection. Like, oh, you're not just reading something off of a script that was created for you from your marketing team. It's really thinking about it more authentically and not focused on getting 659 leads, but maybe 65 leads.
Yeah. And I think that really comes from humanity. We call it the curiosity crate. She was talking about being interested in your customers. We like to say, a lot of people, when they are influencers, they say, look at me, I'm interesting, right? Follow me. We've always said, it started out actually, we talked to our kids and we said, if you want to be interesting, be interested. Be interested in other things and other people. So as marketers and as brands, the more interested you are in your ecosystem that you're building, hopefully, if you're building these relationships, you have purpose and you have mission. Hopefully that comes back to you, and that those people find you interesting. If you're genuinely interested, like we talked about Anthony Bourdain, about how it was just amazing the way that he could go into any different culture and talk to anyone, and they really felt like, wow, this guy really cares. He's really interested in whatever it is that we're saying. And I think we all saw that on TV if we watch Parks Unknown and things like that. I love that show. But anyway, so that's what we like to think. We like to lead with curiosity, and hopefully that's authentic curiosity. I think people can tell the difference in that.
Are your go-to-market teams built for scale, or are they stuck in chaos? At Midgame Consulting, we turn high-growth challenges into operational wins. From sales strategy to CRM to process optimization, we help you get it right so that your organization can grow as your top line grows. Let's transform today's change into tomorrow's success. Visit midgameconsulting.com. That's midgameconsulting.com. We're still in the early stages of AI, and in the last few years, it's really gone leaps and bounds, right? And I think just like any new technology, people will likely take it a little bit too far, right? You almost have to cross the line to go, okay, that's a little bit too far. Let's pull it back now to its utility and the usefulness that we're going to get out of it long term. One of the areas where anybody that I've talked to so far has said that we're going too far is in this personalization thing, to make it seem like it's genuine and that somebody is really interested when you know damn well it's a bot on the other side, right? That is a massive turnoff for anybody that gets those messages. LinkedIn all day long, connection requests that you can tell are the same freaking chat GPT prompt that's used from one to the next, right? But there really is a premium on that authenticity and that connection. And I'm curious to see kind of your thoughts on how that's evolving in the B2B space. I think, Tony, you talked about emotion coming into play a little bit more. Is that where you start to see that?
Sure. I think that's definitely one place where we start to see that with people connecting different ways. Is whether it's emails or through your website. One of the ways that we talk about in the book about connecting and personalization, to your point, showing people how it doesn't work. Everybody's like, well, how do you connect and how do you make things?
Talk about your Nate Bargatze.
that's where I was going. We decided to do personalization through a paradox and show how, when it doesn't work. If you've seen Nate Bargatze do the George Washington thing, and everybody everybody in and around the boat are like, that's people in a meeting thinking that's not the way we things happening. Or we see Kate McKinnon when she's with Ryan Gosling and the spaceships are coming down and you've got the two people saying, this experience for me was, well, it was the best. And Kate McKinnon's like, that's not how I saw things, So we tried to show that SNL through comedy, it was a difficult chapter to write and to show, to your point, it was we're getting so specific, but people can tell the difference when it's not real. It's just like that's BS, right? So how do you do that? It's not easy, we talk in smudges and the human element and different ways to do it, but
yeah, I can't really add anything more to it. I think it is that it was very transactional in B2B, and with AI now coming in, it has kind of felt like it's even more because they're not using AI as a two-way conversation. It's really just one way. And to your point earlier on, Rich, it's really that authenticity. You can call things bullshit when you see it, right? And there's a lot of that happening now because many people aren't using AI the way that it should be used. And to everyone's, there's a lot of people who don't understand how to use it. So there's this world of trying to embrace something where there's not a lot of education that's being put around it to help people make it robust and how to use it in the right ways.
So in the book, you guys have this concept of poise. I'd love to hear a little bit more about that and how that's working into the B to A kind of revolution that we're seeing.
Sure. So Poise is something that how I've always operated in B2C and B2B retail and in B2B. And it stands for personalization, omni-channel, innovation, strategy, and emotional intelligence. And we got Poise, full transparency, through dropping this into ChatGPT and saying, what can we call this? And Poise came up and we're like, damn, that's good. Because that means something right then and there.
We both say, how did we not see that? It was there. We had the words, just not the acronym.
And so I think the operational piece of how you build a business, how you grow a business, how you maintain a business, how you scale a business, these 5 functions are imperative, and personalization is the first one. And we've touched a lot on this earlier in our conversations, but it needs to be more meaningful. It needs to be where people feel seen and heard. And it's not easy. It's not a one hit where you get that. It's building, it's nurturing. It takes time. But if you start with the right information and you've done your homework, that personalization, they should grab on much quicker and be much more efficient within the sales funnel, if you will. And that to me is really important, that personalization and understanding it through the entire funnel, through the entire pipeline. That's how you should be writing your content. That's how you should be speaking to your potential buyers, is in that personalization. Tony, if you want to add anything.
Like I love it as an acronym. It's also because it's a way, not only in marketing, but in life. And we end the book with one of our favorite people is Queen Elizabeth. We thought, it's not your typical marketing study, but she went through life with such poise and such grace, going through all the personalization, omni-channel innovation, and we're like, wow, she really embodies this. It's amazing, and it's all really pulled together. We all know what omni-channel and innovation and strategy are, but the emotional intelligence, bringing that together, the human element in everything, I think that just matters more than ever. I really believe that.
The royalty, I mean, they never had any FaceTime, right? They were behind the walls. They never had to connect with the people, and the people wanted to have that connection. And so it's a great chapter to kind of round everything out. And she speaks to all of these acronyms, and it's a great way to end the book. But omni-channel, innovation, strategy, and EQ, those are the others, and we touched on all of those. And I think they're just really important. That the framework is loosey-goosey too, though. I mean, it's not just B2B or B2C. You kind of start with, what are your objectives? What are your initiatives? And then, kind of like I said, start with what are your goals and work backwards and how you're going to make that happen. Because Tony and I would have conversations. I'm like, people are going to go, we don't have a framework. Then what does that mean? Frameworks they're not going to work for just one way. And that's where the flexibility has to be. And that's why we built the chapter of Mise en Marketing, where you have this foundation, you've got this core business. And so when you need to pivot and you have this agility, you're not throwing everything up in the air and then hoping it's, spraying and praying again. And then if it doesn't work that way, you're throwing it up again. You've got some solid footing. And how many companies have you seen where you have leadership come in and there's, we're going to change the customer. We're going to make the customer younger. We're going to do X, Y, and Z. And it's like, stick with your core, stick with your brand essence, and then have that foundation. It's like building a house without, building, the basement. Why would you do that?
Maybe if you live in Florida.
Oh, well, yeah, they don't have basements.
Yeah, but you still have a foundation, so.
And Rich would know because he's in Florida.
That's right. Yeah. If I had a basement, it would be a problem. See the gators swimming around down there.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, I think omni-channel is probably the one that stands out to me the most, related to what we were talking about earlier in terms of its relevance with B2B. Omni-channel was a unique concept, and wasn't 25 years ago. It wasn't necessarily relevant in B2B, but it very much is now, based on some of the things that we've been talking about and how things are moving there.
Absolutely. And to me, it's not going to go away. And, TikTok is, we were talking about that earlier. This is a statistic I was reading. 85% of people on TikTok play a role in using, in their purchase decision. So 85% of the people that are on TikTok, that's crazy. And it's not just B2C now. It's, there's product that can be sold in many different ways. And so you can't ever say, oh, this social platform's not for me. Don't ever say that, because you just never know.
The other nice thing that you were talking about in terms of frameworks, I think relates to the way that I've described some of the frameworks that I have on the RevOps side of things, is that you have a puzzle and you know what the final picture should look like. But each company that you work with and each situation that you walk into, you start with a slightly different set of pieces. And depending on the company, the pieces are shaped differently as well. So you know what the end product looks like, but how you piece it together is going to be very different depending on the situation, depending on the goals. etc. I'd love to find out from you, as you're going into a company or, whether it's a startup, you're working with entrepreneurs or a larger, more established company, how do you take some of those frameworks and really assess, okay, here are probably the one or two highest value next steps that I can take?
One of the things that we have in the book, anyway, and Tanya can probably speak some of this too. One of the things we have in the book is we call it mosaic marketing, where we have we have a little framework where you build with something old, something new, something bold, something true. Right? It's a little bit of a wedding adage, and we like to say that, like you said, if you have the foundation, like you do in Florida, like we do anywhere, and you bring fragments from all different parts of your life into a mosaic, into that brand mosaic, into the customer's mosaic, into yours. We liken it to Leonardo da Vinci. I talk about myself as a jack of all trades. He was an architect. He was a painter. He was an engineer. He was all these things. You can build that mosaic for your brand in a lot of different ways and bring that to, omni-channel. It's touching us everywhere. Like we say, you've got, whether you are checking in at 9 o'clock and leaving at 5 o'clock, you might be talking about the soccer game at lunchtime. You might be buying a software package at night in bed at 9 o'clock at night. So it's just such a different world in terms of omni-channel. And it's not like you have to be everywhere. It's just you have to be at the right place at the right time, which is another old marketing adage, but it's still true, right? It's just that we've got a lot of so many more different ways to reach people in the omni-channel, right?
Yeah, I would echo a lot of that. It's, when you look at businesses and understanding what their issues, opportunities are, how can you be an extension of that company now? Think of it that way instead of just a transaction. And so that's more effort. That's more EQ. That's more emotional intelligence. That's more engaging. That's becoming that, that connection that people want today. Not everyone. I mean, there's going to be still some old school, people that just don't want that, but the majority today do. And that's where we have to recognize that and build that into the go-to-market framework, the go-to-market strategy, what that means and how we're going to get there.
Yeah, personal attention can be face-to-face, but it can also be agent bots. It can all, like you as long as that's difficult to get there. But if it's however that person is comfortable, making that purchase or interacting with that brand or interacting with your company, you figure out what that means. We like to think that it's human connection, and I think that's the be all and end all for us. It's maybe not for everyone, but still want to feel some type of connection. You have to be able to figure out what that is, right? But I would say, but my kids would say to me, "What is marketing?" I said, "If it works on you, do that, and if it doesn't work on you, figure out why. If it right, it's because it's easy. If it works on you, it's like, oh yeah, I can do that because this worked on me. But if it doesn't work on you, that's the hard part. That's when you got to put in the work and say, okay, this doesn't resonate with me. Why does it resonate with them? And that can be the fun part too. That's part of the curiosity, right? And learning yourself and just being a better marketer.
That's great. I love the concept of business to anyone. And the book is Get Off Your Mass. So where can everybody find that book?
Absolutely. It is on Amazon. So there is a paperback and there's a Kindle version. You will be able to find it there.
Excellent. Yes. And we'll include links to that in the show notes as well. So Tanya, Tony, thank you guys so much for joining us. Are there any last thoughts before we wrap?
I'm good. No, other than I think go into this book with an open mind. I see the book as kind of a coffee table type book where you can pick it up and kind of read another part of it. And it might make you laugh. It might make you think a little differently. And so enjoy the book, and I'd love feedback too. I'll give you my email address as well, Rich.
Excellent. All right. And if people want to find out more beyond the book, how do they do that? And how do they connect with you guys?
Connect with us on LinkedIn. Definitely. And we'll include those addresses as well.
Great. Yeah, that's the easiest way. Yeah, definitely. I hope people like the book. It's more about stories, and hopefully you can see yourself in some of these stories, and you can relate and make analogies to your marketing and to your life. It's not a step-by-step anything. It's just, let's go in and talk about marketing and in real life, and hopefully people like it.
That's great. I'm sure they will. I've definitely enjoyed this conversation and diving into this too. So thank you guys so much for joining us. Thanks for joining us on the Midgame Mindset. If today's episode sparked a new idea or helped shift your perspective, share it with someone who's ready to grow. Subscribe, leave a review, and keep playing the game. With the right mindset, the best moves are still ahead. Until next time, keep changing the game.